Good evening, everyone. We continue our study in the book of Zechariah, and today we are at chapter 3. Now, again, I need to highlight to all of us that Zechariah is a very prophetic book. A lot of things that is being said is not in a historical narrative, but actually in a way to give us an imagery of things to come. Now, the things to come may not be far in the future of where Zechariah was, but basically, it could be at the time of the second temple being constructed, or at his time, or even further in the future. And so, as we go on, some of these passages are not so easy to explain as well. And so, I will do what I can to actually show you how some of these passages could be understood. We come to chapter 3, verse 1. Now, this is a way of a narrative that is describing the prophecies, and then meaning after chapter 2, whatever's been said in chapter 2, uh, then we find that the angel showed me Yehoshua, the Kohen Hagadol, this would be the high priest, standing before the angel of the Lord, and Hasatan standing at his right hand to accuse him. Now, some of these words we tend to actually read into the definition, but let me just point out to you. After chapter 2, as you know, in chapter 2, we were looking at a number of prophetic images. And then we have the man that was describing things to Zechariah. And he continues to show Zechariah Joshua. Now, this word here is Joshua, and this is Yehoshua. Yehoshua means uh, Yah will save, or Yah, or here in this case, Jehovah. This is the short form, right? Yah is the short form. Jehovah will save is the name for Yehoshua. You will also read this name in the book of Joshua towards the end of the book of Deuteronomy when Joshua was appointed the replacement of Moses. So it is a popular name. And this word, Yehoshua, when it is compacted or in its abbreviated form, it is Yeshua. And we see this also in the book of Ezra. So let's be very clear that Yehoshua at this point in time is the contemporary with Zechariah. So at this time, bear in mind there are a couple of very important names. We have Yehoshua, which is Joshua. We have Zerubbabel. We have Ezra. We have Nehemiah. We have Haggai. We have Malachi. And then we have Zechariah. This will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So just be mindful that even though we talk about Joshua, the high priest, it is part and parcel of 7 very important individuals or personalities within the final period, which is post-exile from Babylon. Now, the imagery that we see is that Joshua or Yehoshua, the high priest, Kohen Hagadol, the high priest, he was standing in front. It is to the face. of the angel of the Lord. Now, in this case, understand, and shall repeat myself here. This word is malak. It is translated as messenger or angel. It means one who walks on behalf of another. In this case, uh, this angel is walking on behalf of Jehovah. Now, in the old days, for example, in ancient China, you read the concept of 圣旨, the 升级, that the imperial edict. When the emperor is wanting to communicate with somebody from afar, he would send his messenger with the message, and for all intents and purposes, the messenger represents the emperor. And the culture actually realizes that when this messenger is standing before the people would bow as if the emperor was there. And when the message is read by the messenger, it is heard as if the emperor spoke the words. And so this concept of messenger of the Lord, or malak, Yehovah, is in this same concept, that this angel is speaking and acting on behalf of God. And then at the same time, there would be Satan. This is Hasatan. We see this in Job chapters 1 and 2, that he is an angel of God that is to do a very peculiar role, which is to oppose. So he is the opposer, he is the accuser, so that there is a contention of good and evil, and that all of us can actually then understand the situation. He was standing at his right. Now, every time you see this right hand or left hand, right hand is a hand of power, is a hand of authority. And so he is standing at the right hand to challenge his authority. That's how it's going to be understood. This word accuse is to resist, to oppose. And he is acting as an adversary. Now, why is Hasatan present in this case? Now, Hasatan is present in this case, and that we need to have a bit of a background. So let me just write down on this slide. The background is actually Ezra chapter 10, verses 18 to 19. Now, one of the things that you would see in the book of Leviticus is that the priest has very peculiar restrictions with regards to marriage. The priest cannot marry anyone that is not part of the 12 tribes. The priest cannot marry a widow or any woman who was married before. And so there were marriage restrictions for priests. Now understand that Yehoshua is the high priest. But what happened at the time of Ezra, or at the time of the exile, was that Yehoshua, or Joshua, we see here, did not stop his children from marrying pagan wives. And thereby, we have Hasatan accusing the high priest that he has done wrong. And that would be the picture of chapter 3, verse 1. So understand that whenever we talk about Yehoshua, we also bring in mind what's happening to Zerubbabel, to Ezra, to Nehemiah, to Haggai, and to Malachi. And so go back and read Ezra chapter 10, verses 18 and 19. This same instance was brought up again in the book of Malachi chapter 3. And so Hasatan is shown with the angel. Now, understand that this is not in the human realm. It's in a different dimension. And Zechariah somehow is able to see the vision. And in this vision, after looking at the angel of God, and then looking at Hasatan, and then looking at Yehoshua, the three of them standing with each other, and Hasatan accusing Yehoshua, the conclusion from chapter 3, verse 2 says, and the Lord said to Satan, Hasatan. So understand that whenever we have the angel of the Lord like this, he is also speaking on behalf of God, so that we can see it often enough, like in Exodus chapter 3. The angel of the Lord was there, and then it seems that it was God speaking. And so it is the angel of the Lord speaking on behalf of God, what God is trying to say. And this is addressed to Hasatan. He says, Jehovah rebukes you, Satan. Indeed, the Lord Jehovah, who has chosen Jerusalem, rebukes you. Is this not a log snatched from the fire? Now, we need to understand these are all imagery of the vision. So it is the angel speaking on behalf of God. And so these are important words spoken to Hasatan, the specific angel who is acting as an adversary. He says, the Lord rebukes you. Now understand that this word rebuke, it appears to us as something very strong. It is scold you, as a father scolds a son, as you scold somebody else, right? This is the idea of the English word rebuke or reproof, as a father reproves or disciplines the son. The Lord rebukes you, the Lord scolds you. Indeed, this is what the Lord is saying. Uh, and and God himself is rebuking him, and it says here 2 times. God is not happy at you opposing, and so he rebukes. So it is not a condemnation, it is a scolding. And the scolding is such that God has chosen Jerusalem as the place for the temple. It is important that in this context, whenever Jerusalem is spoken, it's about the temple, it's being rebuilt. Remember, Haggai and Zechariah. Haggai was at the time when they were starting to build the temple. Zechariah spans a much longer period. And so this is to tell them this is a log, and this is with regards to Joshua or Yehoshua. He is seen as being snatched from the fire, a firebrand or a log that is taken from the fire. And so the fire could be seen as one of two things. So I will just explain because it may not be absolutely clear. There is from the Jewish tradition that Joshua was thrown into the fire together with 2 other criminals or false prophets. And the story goes that Joshua was rescued from the fire. The only thing that affected him was that his clothes were singed, meaning the clothes got caught fire a little bit, but he was unhurt. And this is the picture in verse 3. The other explanation for fire is always about the opposition to rebuild the temple, which we read in the book of Ezra and Nehemiah as well. And so in verse 3 it says, now Joshua was clothed in filthy garments. And filthy garments is a picture either of clothes that's been singed or a picture of having wrong. And so filthy garments is actually always contrasted with pure garments, something that is wrong in the eyes of God and something that is right in the eyes of God. So these are the concepts of filthy versus pure. So filthy here would be soiled, dirty, and that kind of an idea. The opposing would be pure, and we will read it in verse 4. Now, in this case, Joshua was standing. There were three of them, right? Remember, Yehoshua, the angel of the Lord, and Hasatan was talking. Yehoshua was seen in filthy garments, and he was standing towards the face of the angel. Always read, standing before is standing to the face. So always see verse 1 is standing to the face of the angel. In verse 4, and he responded and said to those who were standing before him, saying, and this would be the angel of the Lord, right? The angel of the Lord is saying to all those who were standing before him. Now, who was standing before him? So we have Joshua or Yehoshua and Hasatan, who was accusing Yehoshua. He says, remove the dirty garments from him. Again, he said to him, see, I have taken your guilt away from you. And this guilt is about Joshua. And will clothe you with festive robes. Now, this idea of festive robes, these are robe of stateliness. These are grand robes, right? These are apparel that is beautiful, majestic. And so we have a contrast of filthy versus festive pure robes. And this is a change of garment, right? From dirty garments, filthy means dirty garments, to garments that is in a stately form. Garments in stately form would be decked with bright colors, decked with gold, decked with what we will call important apparel, right? Important clothes. Then I said, have them put a clean headband, or this would be a turban, on his head. And so they put a clean turban on his head and clothed him with garments while the angel of the Lord was standing by. Now, again, you need to understand that in this, there were others who were standing there besides Hasatan, And I think we can imagine there were other angels as well. Now, we're not told specifically, it's just that there is this Hebrew concept of talking to people beyond Yehoshua and Hasatan. And so now we have a turban for the head. And this turban, I would say that this would be a high priest turban, that he is fulfilling his role as a high priest to make sure that the temple is built correctly. Now, this entire expression is very much to do with the temple that's being built, and it is also to cleanse Yehoshua. And so what would be his filth or his guilt? Right? His guilt. His guilt is Ezra chapter 10, verses 18 and 19. Again, I highlight. He has allowed his children and other priests and Levites to marry pagan women while in Babylon. And that's a no-no. Now that they are back in Jerusalem, they are told to divorce them and send them home. And thereby, the priest will have to comply to the book of Leviticus, to the marriage restrictions, and thereby keep himself clean and then oversee the construction of the temple. Now, that is the picture that we're given in verses 4 and 5. And then, and then the angel of the Lord admonished Yehoshua. Now, this is not specifically, uh, not specifically just admonishing. It is to charge Joshua, uh, invoking as witness, right? Invoking as witness. And so the charge is given. So I don't think admonish is a good word here, right? So I'll strike it off, because the command that's charged to Joshua says this: the Lord of armies says this. He has to then pay attention. If you walk in my ways and perform my service, then you will both govern my house and be in charge of my courtyards, and I will grant you free access among those who are standing here. Now, a couple of words that needs to be explained is this. In verse 7, that if you walk in my ways, what do you mean walk in the ways? These are the directions that God commanded. So walk in them, conduct your lives in them. And so in Ezra chapter 10, we are seen and told that Yehoshua or Joshua instructs the priests and his sons to send all their pagan wives back to Babylon and make sure that they are clean before God. So this is important. If they do that, and then it says here, perform my service. Now, perform my service don't exactly mean that. It means that you would keep my charges. Now, a charge is this. This is charge. Keep whatever I have charged you to do. All of these. Keep what I have asked you to keep. That would be another way of saying it, right? Then you will govern my house, and that would be the temple, and be in charge of my courtyards. That's the area outside the temple. And I will grant you free access among those who are standing here. And then you will find that this is a promise of a divine access to a different dimension, right? To a different dimension. In verse 8, we continue. It says, now listen. Listen means to pay attention. Pay attention. Hear properly. Yehoshua, you are the high priest. You and your friends who are sitting in front of you, indeed, they are men who are assigned. And this is uh, interesting because this word here, assign, um, how should we say, as a, it would be a miracle. I think would be a better word, miracle. You would see a miracle coming out before you. Behold, I'm going to bring in my servant the branch or the shoot. So here lies two possible explanations. It is saying that if it is in those days, in the days of Zechariah, it would refer to my servant as Zerubbabel. And he eventually becomes governor and somebody very important. But at this point in time, he is not someone very important yet, but he will be. Now, another way of looking at the branch, which some commentators would have said, that this refers to the Messiah, the Mashiach, because it is the same terminology that was given to the branch of David. And so we find that Zerubbabel fits this because he is also from the branch of David. And so God is saying, I will make sure that all these things happen, that my temple will be built. That is the entire crux of this chapter, that God says, Hasatan, do not stop Joshua. He has repented. I will put on him clean clothes, stately clothes, and he will become the leader of the house of God because he has repented. In verse 9, it says, for behold, look, the stone that I've put before Joshua. This is the cornerstone. Cornerstone. And this is the stone that is in the foundation. And this is in the book of Haggai, chapter 2. This is also the stone that is being referred to that is for the temple, for the second temple. It is a very important aspect because the post-exilic prophets are speaking from this viewpoint that the temple of God is important to be rebuilt. On one stone are 7 eyes. Now in verse 9, when it says 7 eyes, you would find that 7 pairs of eyes, because the eyes here are in a dual form. Now, who are the 7 pairs of eyes? On this stone, there will be Joshua, Yehoshua. There will be Zerubbabel. There will be Ezra. There will be Nehemiah or Nehemiah. Then you would find that we have the 3 prophets, Haggai, Malachi, and Zechariah. And so with this, we have 7 pairs of eyes. Behold, I am going to engrave an inscription on it. Engraving inscription is what God is saying. What this means is that this is at end of construction. So this is a prediction or a prophecy that there will be a completion of this temple, declares the Lord of armies or Lord of hosts, and I will remove the guilt of that land in one day. So remove the guilt is to cleanse the land of all the wrongs, and they will be pure again. There will be no guilt. Now, always remember this concept. The guilt is what has been committed. And so God says, I will remove. Now, the idea of removing literally means to withdraw, right? To withdraw. It will also mean to cause to depart, so that these people will not be punished. So this would very much be not just the guilt, but the punishment of the guilt. That would be 70 years, and there will be a place of desolation. And so God says, when He removes this, people will come back, they will build, there will be agriculture, there will be life back in the country, in Jerusalem, and in the temple. And God will do that in one day. Now, what is expected then would be in that day, Yehoshua will be high priest, Zerubbabel will be governor, Ezra and Nehemiah will be there to enable the temple to be rebuilt. Haggai, Malachi, and Zechariah will be all the three prophets who will be prophesying during this period. We come to the end of our chapter today in verse 10. On that day, when the temple is built, declares the armies of the Lord of armies, everyone will invite his neighbor to sit under the vine and fig tree. These are in the imagery of fellowship, to enjoy the fruit of whatever they have planted. And this would be the man and his neighbor. Love your neighbor as yourself, your companion, your friend, your brethren. And this will depict a time of peace where they will enjoy the fruits of the land, and they can sit beneath the trees to chat and to talk about things of God. Now, Zechariah chapter 3 really deals with the people, particularly Yehoshua. And then you have the opposer, Hasatan, coming to accuse Yehoshua. Now you have the angel of the Lord speaking to scold the Hasatan, that this is a thing of the past. We have the priests and the priesthood have now cleansed themselves. And so God says, I will bring back the peace to the land, and the temple will definitely be built, and with Zerubbabel as the eventual governor. And there will be peace once again in the land of Israel. That would be Zechariah chapter 3. And with this, we come to the end of our session today.